Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream of EU Made Simple. Thank you all for being here. Very interesting. Could you guys please let me know if the audio is all right? That is always the question. I see my frames are dropping slightly. I have many things running right now. It's great, everyone says. Wonderful. Excuse the sometimes lagging a little bit of my webcam. Normally, I have my co-host, obviously, Lambertus Orban, to help me. Today, we're going to do it alone, and that is no problem at all, because we have two amazing guests today. We start out with our first guest, Mr. Mingo Garscha. He is the Europe Elects Austria correspondent. And later tonight, we have Dietmar Pichler. Sorry, the Austrian names are a bit difficult for me. A disinformation expert, mostly disinformation expert, but also Austrian. So there should be very interesting to talk about, many things to talk about. And as always, you guys know, please follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, join our Discord. There's much fun to be had there. And so I guess without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking today about the Austrian elections. And I will do that using the following website. As you can see, there are polls and trends for Austrian election 2024. Website is called politpro.eu. So you can probably find that by just Googling it. It's very simple, but it's a very nifty tool because you can see everything and also see some possible coalitions. But I won't do that alone. Like I said, we're going to do it with Mingo Garscha. And Mingo Garscha is, like I said, the Europe Elects Austria correspondent. And hopefully he can teach us a lot about everything that's going to be happening on Sunday and everything, preferably that happened before as well. So without further ado, Mingo Garscha, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I hope everyone can hear Mingo as well. I believe they can. I don't see why they shouldn't. But yeah, please introduce yourself. What is it that you do? Who are you associated with? Who are you?
We at Europe Elects are mainly a poll aggregator, political intelligence a group, let's say it like that. And I mean, we are part of a bigger group, also the Elects group. There's also America Elects or Schengen Elects and so on, the Asia Elects. But we in Europe, one of our main products is basically poll aggregation. For lots of you may have seen at the EU election, our projections for the seat projection is one of the more well-known products of us, but we have also our podcast, like newsletters and so on. Generally, what we do is we check polls, we try to make averages, we try to check out which pollsters are good, which are not so good for all countries in Europe, and that's kind of what we try to do for everything, to make a bit more, also to make it a bit more easy for everybody, like you to hear, to make it a bit more simple to get through European politics.
Because we both know that it's not the easiest thing to follow at all. So yeah, no, me personally, I've definitely seen the Europe Elects, the graphics on social media, and always very useful. Can you, before we really get into it, can you quickly explain how the Austrian elections work? Because what are the Austrians going to be voting for this Sunday? I'm wondering, is it not a local election, right? Not a regional one? Go ahead.
Normally, if you would ask in Austria, everybody would say it's the parliament election.
Right.
Theoretically, we have a two-chamber parliament, but one chamber is not really very powerful, so we elect this time the very powerful chamber of our parliament, the national chamber. I think it was you can see it was on the screen a little before that. It has 183 seats. It's proportional representation for the whole country. That's what we are electing. Maybe a bit of deeper information that I can give, is it's on one hand, it's a classical list election, so we will vote for parties, not for individual people, for example, it's done in Ireland or something like that. But we have a small open list system too, so we can give our preferred people from the list. Also, it's a bit a complicated system. It's a bit hard to get jumping up, but theoretically, there's also a bit of an influence in this direction. But that would be probably too many details already to go in there.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's mainly also the discussion, the media discussion. If you follow, it's like this party, that party, and
Sure.
left party
And in Austria, there's plenty of political parties. Before we dive into that, I want to just let the chat know. Please ask your questions. I would really love to go into them together with Mingo, but I cannot ask all the questions. So if you really feel like you have a burning question and you want to have it answered, please use the super chat feature. So you not only get your question answered, but also support the channel and the work that we do. So very much appreciate it. So Mingo, there are a lot of political parties in Austria, right? We already saw them on the screen before. There are, well, I see 4 here or 3 here, and the others. Can you? I guess the best thing to do is to go through all of these parties one by one and kind of maybe think about what their general stances are, and maybe a short history, things like that. So I guess we'll begin with the biggest and maybe the most internationally known when it comes to Austrian elections, the FPÖ, if I say that correctly.
Yes.
Please, what do they stand for?
I think the name stands for Freedom Party. They are affiliated with in Europe with the Patriots for Europe. So maybe some of you know in France the Rassemblement National, in Italy Lega, in Holland it's I think PVV.
Yes.
That is affiliated with them. So it's a classical right wing, right populist, far right party. It moves so sometimes a bit around between more to the populist arm, more to the right wing arm of it over the years. I mean, they're quite also as a party that exists also nearly since the end of the Second World War. It's a bit younger than the other big parties, but it was for a long time a small party. And in the 90s, it had its first growth, and in the 2000s, then it fell down, then it came up again. And last, I think, what is probably known out of the shorter history, maybe for some of you, the so-called Ibiza Scandal, I don't know, was a big scandal that led to the last election, basically, that we had.
Yeah.
After that, in the last election, FPÖ was on a very small level.
Maybe before we continue, just to catch people up, the Ibiza Scandal, could you very shortly explain what that is? Because I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what happened.
It was like in Ibiza at a house was the vice chancellor, who was the head of the party of FPÖ, was filmed trying to sell the biggest newspaper to a Russian oligarch, but it was all a setup and was filmed. And I mean, this is a very shortened version.
Yes.
I know those who are deep into the Austrian politics will see that it's like a bit more complicated, the story, but that was kind of the story, and that let the government fail. That was back then a ÖVP-FPÖ government. And that was it was back then was apostrophed at the end of the party and so on. But 5 years later, I mean, that's maybe also typical for Austrian politics of the North scandals. We have quite a handful sometimes, and like this, they get also often quite quickly forgotten again.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a question about that because, well, we saw the government fall back in the Ibiza scandal, but it seems that people have now maybe forgotten or forgiven, or at least it's not on the minds anymore, what happened 5 years ago, and FPÖ is at the top again. What do you think that is?
I think one of the things is that there was FPÖ tried to make quite a hard cut. I mean, the guy that was back then, also Strache, the guy that was in this video, was kicked out of the party. He had then in between his own small party that was failing at regional elections, but and they tried to positionate themselves a bit to make it forgotten. And there came some further scandals on the way. And maybe also, I mean, this is a bit already touching the next party of ÖVP. Back then, the chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, I think he was also a bit known in Europe. Some scandals catched up also with him. And so a bit in the idea, it was then also, as he was a very prominent figure, a lot of the scandal just rather stuck with him than with them, I think. That could also be a thing. And then the other thing that happens, maybe we come also later to this a bit again, is if there are not too many topics to discuss about in Austrian politics, it always goes back to migration, and that's a strong topic for FPÖ.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about that.
Maybe what I can still say is they're led at the moment by Herbert Kickl, He was the interim minister of this government back then, and he's rather in the spectrum between right-wing populism and right-wing. He's rather on the right-wing side, I would say. And what he took also with him is like when there was the corona measurements, they tried to very hard go on this anti-measurement stance, going to the protests against the lockdowns and all of this, and catch there also. I think this was the way how to position it themselves and get up again. But you can see also the board there came the uptick again.
Yeah. So the OVP, VP, they were in a coalition with the FPÖ a few years ago, right? So before the Ibiza Scandal that we just talked about. Who are they? And basically the same question. What do they stand for?
Yeah, this is the Austrian People's Party, and sit in Europe with the European People's Party. So what you can know maybe is like from Germany, CDU, like with Merkel, was one of the parties similar like this, but also in France, the Républicains. I mean, they're not so big now anymore. They're here and there. I think in every country has like a party, the typical
like a Christian Democrat.
Christian Democrat, conservative party. That this kind of, I mean, they are one of the two big parties together with the SPÖ that were for many years like the typical center right to the center left counterpart that was often governing together in Austria for many years.
Right.
And before the Ibiza Scandal, there was like they were a bit on the downfall. And then came with Sebastian Kurz, a young guy that pushed them up. But what made the difference a bit was like he was also going hard on the migration topic. That was before that not so much within that party.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you mentioned SPO already. What about them?
They are the center left counterpart. They were like also governing since a lot of time, but like since the 2000s, they are like a bit not so much in the government anymore. Here and there still, of course, but in between they were FPÖ governments. At the moment, they were hoping also to, all three of these parties were hoping to get the first place. I mean, I think they still hope. They're fell a bit back in the polls. As I mean, maybe it's also maybe what I can tell is like they have their head of the party, Andreas Babler, was the first time that he was voted by the whole all the party members and not only by the party elites. And like some of the party elites, I think, are not super happy with him. So there's a lot of infighting going on, and some of this is going on over the media. So that's of course sometimes not super great for election campaigns.
No, I can definitely imagine. So what about now I guess we come to the more smaller parties, and I feel like we should maybe say before, I believe that there is a 5% threshold for the minimum of to get into 4%, sorry.
It's a 4% threshold, and later on, but maybe not yet, but later on when it comes to KPÖ, there's a small twist to the 4% threshold that we can then also shortly discuss. There's a way of overcoming the 4% threshold without getting 4%.
Okay. I see. But that's an important thing to know. You need more than 4% to be able to get into the parliament, right? Okay. So then we come to NEOS. And what is NEOS? Because I see the classic ones. We have the FPÖ, then the OVP, the center right, the center left, and the SPÖ, and then NEOS. What does NEOS stand for then?
NEOS is the Liberal Party in Austria. There was already, they have just the name is like, I mean, the name is NEOS. I think it's officially the New Austria, but in Austria, I think like nearly nobody knows that they have also the New Austria in their name because it's just NEOS all the time. They were like, they're basically, we had a Liberal Party in the 90s that was kind of failing in one point, and they picked up from it. And this is maybe also why they don't have the word liberal in the name. They sit in the EU Parliament with Renew Europe. So this is Renaissance from Macron. German FDP, from Holland, maybe VVD, Democratie 66. However, I'm not so good at pronouncing that. Maybe as you may with these parties, is also known that they are like, I think the liberals are often sometimes a bit hard to catch on where on the left-right scale they are, because so they're probably, I mean, they're definitely on the left of FDP from Germany, and probably on the right of D66 from Holland. So they are kind of in the center of this liberal I think what is maybe differentiates them from the rest of the parties that we talked about, they are very, very open to governing. I mean, it comes also often with liberal parties. I think that they are like trying to position it themselves as the rational, open to discussion party. That's kind of their way.
But also, of course, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I can imagine not only just the being the quote unquote rational choice, but maybe the setting themselves open for wanting to go into government gives them, a stronger position. If they're willing to go with everyone, then you can always negotiate, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's nearly everyone, not with FPO. I mean, that's also when we come into coalition.
Yeah, of course,
one of the big topics with FPO that like they will have not the easy time to find a coalition partner. But yeah, that's kind of.
I mean, I guess the final one next to, or like the final one that, I mean, according to these polls, meets the threshold, the Grüne, and they are part of the current coalition.
Exactly.
And they were in quite a bit of drama, if I recall correctly. Something to do with the European, or like some piece of European legislation. We'll get into that, but first, really quickly, the Greens. Well, I think most people can kind of know what the Greens stand for, but still, to finish off the list. Who are the Greens?
Very, very classical Green Party, also like typical, like nearly all Green parties in Europe, somewhere in the 80s founded and made their way in the government. Maybe a little bit that is also from the history interesting about them. They were always in the parliament, and then not the last election, but the one before, they had a split off, and the party could not make the 4% threshold and was not in the government. Then there was a big shock going through the party and the sympathizers, let's say, of the party, and then was shortly after the next election because of the Ibiza Scandal, and they surged to, I think, 14% and had a really strong showing, while the split off vanished into, they don't really exist anymore, let's say it like that. And like this, they instantly came from not being in the parliament to being into the government. And yeah, that's the thing. And maybe to go to the situation, it was like the government parties, the Green Party and the ÖVP have like not too many things in common, let's say it like this. And there was a big discussion about this European renaturation initiative. And maybe like Austria is a federal state, so also our states have quite a lot to say. And there was a discussion about if the minister from the Green Party is allowed to vote on the thing that she would like to vote on, or if she's held back by the by a vote of the federal states. But then, of course, the federal states are not all government party led, and of course the people from SPO who have states had, of course, also the fun of allowing from their side, their point of view, saying, hey, we changed our mind, and she voted for it. And then ÖVP sued her, and they sued them back, and let's say they are not really best friends anymore.
No, I can imagine, and it sounds like one big happening. Maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into that in a few minutes. To just finish off the list, we have something called beer. At the beer party, and we uploaded a video of it today on our YouTube channel. I don't know if you have seen it or heard of it, but it's definitely an interesting one. Could you go into a bit? What is the beer party? Because this sounds a bit out of the general list here.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the beer party is basically started as a fun satirical project of a musician from a band called Turbo Beer, and it started like he ran in a regional election in Vienna with like some really like lots of funny campaigns of saying, hey, he wants to have like a free beer fountain and all of this. And then they came into in some district parliaments in Vienna, and there I think they found a bit the interest into politics, let's say it like that. And he ran in the presidential election quite, I mean, not unsuccessful. And now they are kind of a bit of an anti-establishment, pro-European, how to say, social liberal party. I mean, they kind of started to be a bit more, I mean, he's like, it's very much on him, on about the person. You don't know too many people out of the party, and I think that's also, if you see like they are scratching the threshold around the EU election, it looked like they will easily make the threshold. They were polling at 7-8%, but the longer the campaign goes, you can see it's a bit hard for like one person that comes out of politics, I think, to keep it going. And you can feel it that like time by time the polls go always a bit down. which could get a bit hard for them to, But let's see. I mean, I think they are the ones who poll the best at the moment, still from the small parties.
From the small parties. I mean, it would be very interesting to see them make the threshold. That's very interesting. And then I guess the final one in this list, at least, the KPÖ.
That's the Communist Party of Austria.
Communist Party. All right.
They had like they are one of the oldest parties in Europe, even theoretically.
Wow.
But they're like, I mean, I looked now for the Europe elects work for the election. I looked on their results since 1945, and they were once in the parliament, I think in 47 or something. And since then, they had always like around 1%, around 0%, 1% was nothing going on. But then, like some years ago in Graz, this is the second biggest city in Austria, they won the mayorship with a campaign that is very much focused on housing and like also on the people working there. Really, I mean, they try to get away a bit from this idea of like this classic, I don't know, they don't position it themselves as Marxist-Leninist or something anymore, but like us, like basically as a bit the true social democrats. They are working and for the people. Right. And some years ago, additionally, the youth wing of the Green Party separated from the party and joined the Communist Party. And now their main candidate is an ex-Green youth politician, let's say like that. And they were quite successful also in Salzburg region and Tyrolean region in the regional elections, so they have a bit of hope. And here I promised first that we have a little twist to the 4% threshold, because this will be hard for them. But you can also get into the parliament if you have in one district, let's say like this, or in like one constituency, a high enough percentage. And there is a chance that they make this in the Graz constituency. Like if they get half of the vote from their regional election, they would be in parliament no matter if they have the 4% or not. So that can be still an interesting way.
And why specifically there? Do you know why they're so popular there?
It's mainly, I think there are two politicians there, local politicians that were very early already they were always strong in this area. And I think, they were very early going on housing, making really contacts, donating their salaries to get people in a flat and all of this. And I think it was a very personal thing. And it seems by now they've kind of learned that they can try to roll this out all over Austria. They never did this before, so I think that's kind of the way there.
Okay. And what is like a big? Because I'm very interested. When I hear a communist party, that's like you don't really hear that often anymore throughout Europe. So is there like, what is their main policy goal that they're trying to achieve? You said they're a bit, I guess, proliferating them or profiling themselves a bit more as the real social democrats. But what is a big policy that they're pushing on?
Yeah, I mean, as the big policies are, I mean, like that they're now campaigning on one thing is like to make it easier to get I mean, if you want to rent a flat, you have to in the beginning pay some fees and for getting in a lot and to reduce these fees. This is one of the things, and to get for everybody the chance to have a flat, then to have some taxation on people with a lot of wealth is a topic. And another topic that you can see on the posters that they have is a lot of like, let's get a nurse elected into parliament. So let's get simple people into the parliament. This is also a way that they're trying to like showing themselves like basically as the
trying to be the for the people, the real people's party, right? Okay, interesting. So there's so many things that we could talk about right now, but I guess it may be a bit interesting to go back to what we already said about the Greens ÖVP scandal. I'm very interested into who are you could almost call them the main characters, the main players, the main people that are currently associated or that are going to be very important for these elections. So, go ahead.
I mean, you mean not general for the election or from the Green Party and the scandal? Because
that was a example, right? So obviously that one, but I mean more generally for the election.
Okay, I mean generally, the main character is definitely Herbert Kickl from the FPÖ, the leader. I mean, it's a big game of everybody who it feels a bit like an election of him against everybody else. That's also what they're of course trying to get into because it helps them in the election. But there is this is kind of the biggest topic a bit is all of this, like how do we go on with democracy? How do we go on within the European Union? These topics are kind of like one of the big games.
Right.
The other thing is for sure, like with the scandal, Leonora Gewessler, she's the minister who was from the Green Party at the EU and voted for it.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess she's also like, I mean, she's not the main candidate of the party. But that is like the vice chancellor Kogler. But she's like, she became a bit the face of the person that the ÖVP doesn't like and their voters don't like anymore. Yeah, let's see. I mean, there's the interesting thing is, I don't know, like there were the floodings in the last weeks. So
Yep.
this is a bit close for getting still polling in to see if this helped or who this helped or if it even had no influence, because that could be was kind of a bit, yeah, the feeling when you follow the media that there was a bit of it was a bad topic for FPO because they are also denying
Okay.
climate change and so on, and maybe a good topic for the Green
Right.
Party.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, in the polling, I didn't see yet anything, but it's also, I mean, it's hard to, let's see if we get still polling until the weekend that maybe has
Yeah.
this time frame better included.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously still polling, right? So we don't know yet what's going to happen on Sunday. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. There are. I'm very curious about the current topics that are very, let's say, important or very close to the Austrians' hearts. Like, what is the main? What are the main debates, the main discussions being held right now? You already mentioned migration, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite funny because before preparing for this talk, I was thinking a lot about the topic, and then I was thinking, why do I have to think so much about it, even though there's an election campaign ongoing? And then it was quite fun. I looked at the election posters, and if you take away a bit your knowledge about the parties and how they frame themselves, you could use a lot of the election posters for each party. So there's at this time there's not so much topics. It's a lot of like everybody tries to get a bit of a feeling. I mean, you could, in a positive way, you could say it's about where does Austria go in the future. That this is like the way that is the topic. But you could also say they just everybody tries a bit to recycling their hits from the last years. So there's of course in the migration topic, there is like ÖVP goes very much into stability. We need to in this changing world with the conflicts, we need a stable way forward. This is the few SBO was a bit like, hey, we're the ones that look after all the people, and we are like trying to be the healthcare and to look in a bit more social, but not too much, not to be worried. It's not going too far to the left. The Green Party is of course climate change, trying to foster this, and the Neos try to make a bit economy and like, but overall there is not really a topic where you say like all parties go on this topic and discuss it.
Interesting.
That's kind of the thing. Like this in Austria, it always defaults a bit to migration. There, everybody has something to say. Some are more happy about to say something about it. Some, like for example, this is one of the topics, have internal fights on what is the position, which is of course not super helpful sometimes. Yeah,
I can imagine. So if I get it correctly, basically most of the parties are having their own issue or like their own issues that they think are important, and they're messaging that instead of there being one nationally or a few national big issues that people are having an opinion on.
Yes, I mean there would be issues like inflation or something, but you feel like it's like seems to always end up being a bit a side topic, even though it was in the last month big topics in the discussion in the media. But like with the election campaign, I had the feeling that died a bit down.
So okay, if by mentioning migration, you triggered me a little bit, and I saw a comment earlier in the chat as well, saying that basically when I hear Austria and migration together in a sentence, my first thought goes to Romania and Bulgaria and Schengen. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to. Before I go further into that, I want to tell the chat, I see all of your wonderful debating. I just want to remind everyone, just keep it civil, please. And come up with your questions. We would love to hear your questions, especially because we're talking about migration now. I feel like that's a very touchy topic. So if you have any serious questions that you want to have discussed, please let us know. So yes, migration, Schengen. Austria, and then Schengen. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
could could you help me understand a little bit? Because for me, sometimes it's a bit difficult to get the lens into this Austrian topic.
Yeah. I mean, this was like Romania and Bulgaria are trying
Yes,
to,
of
or
course. Yeah,
now
yeah.
partially
Explain it first,
did,
please. Yeah.
partially joined Schengen, but in the beginning, when there was the time that they should join Schengen, Austria was one of the few countries, and in the end, I think kind of the only country. I think Holland was in the beginning also
Yes.
still saying declining that they can join. That was kind of a bit of a bigger topic because, like, of course, there was like from the Romania, Bulgaria, the view, hey, we fulfilled everything that was asked for, and why is there still saying no? I mean, the perspective from Austrian side, I have to say, I mean, or maybe it's just my perspective, was also like Chancellor Nehammer. It had a lot to do with internal politics, to be honest. It was like, as always, he wanted to show us that they're big tough on migration. They want to control the borders and they want to have secure borders and not opening the borders. I mean, if you see, like, I mean, we had this now in the media also with Germany, but Austria is also one of the countries that make still border controls, even though they're in Schengen in a lot of, mostly in the southern and eastern borders. And that was kind of just wanting to put the foot in and say, hey, no, we do something for you. We secure the borders. And I think like Romania and Bulgaria got a bit of a, how to say, I don't think it was more directed to them than it was directed to the electorate in the country. I have to say, by now, back then when we discussed it a bit, like in, like to say, in Austria was always saying like, yeah, and if this discussion dies down, then there will come a short flow of making it happen. Now they made it over the airports, and soon it will be probably after the election. It will be probably done. Is my guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but my guess is it was just more like a bit of a advertisement, and unfortunately external politics in Austria is a topic that is mostly used for internal politics and not for something else.
So in summary, they just basically used the topic to be a bit more attractive to the at-home audience.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, thank you. We have a question from the chat. Prex6, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that, but asks, will FPÖ stop aid to Ukraine? Do you know the stances of? Yeah, I think it's a very important topic to talk about. What are the stances, and in this case of the FPÖ on Ukraine and delivering aid to Ukraine? Thank you for your question.
It's definitely a very interesting question. More so as FPÖ had like has a past in the past had a friendship agreement with the party of Putin. By now they separated that, but of course there is still this. I mean, I think a lot of these parties that are in the Patriots for Europe have some connections to Russia, or at least are rumored to have some connections, depending on which outlet they are. They are also very hard. I mean, Austria is the official and neutral country. FPÖ is also very much pushing on that. And I think I mean, it's always, what is said before the elections and after the elections can be a bit different. I mean, I guess it would reduce or make it harder to help Ukraine if they would be in the government. It has to be said now still, as we are a neutral country in Austria, there is no military aid now going from Austria to Ukraine either. It's only humanitarian aid. And I think that's a similar topic of like probably being placative. And then when comes everyday politics, I don't think that, how to say, it's probably not a topic in a coalition agreement where a party in Austria would break the coalition over, let's say it like this. So if another party would want it very much, I cannot imagine that this would be a deal breaker or something like that.
Right. I mean, I kind of totally just forgot that. Well, I know that Austria is oftentimes projecting itself as the neutral party, but having the aid is only humanitarian right now. I mean, I guess they do fund indirectly through European funds ish.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this is really not a big topic. Then I'm assuming around these elections.
How to say, it's a topic that is kind of hard for many of the parties, because the second part of this topic is the natural gas deliveries that Austria has, and Austria has really still a high amount of natural gas that they buy from Russia still until today, and nobody wants to really talk about it from the parties, because it doesn't really work so well with supporting Ukraine, and on the other hand, buying still the gas because it's cheap from Russia. So
Yeah.
also the other big parties, I mean, in these deals that are going there, I mean, these contracts are going very many years, and let's say all the parties that were in the governments in the last 10, 15 years, which is quite some of them that are in the parliament at the moment, were in one point accepting these deals, making these deals. So nobody wants to really position it themselves very hard against it. Maybe
Right.
only the Neos, they have it easier, they were never in the government.
Okay. Before we go to the last topic that I would like to discuss with you, which is coalitions, it's always fun to look into our crystal balls and predict the future, which obviously never goes wrong. But there's one more good question that I wanted to ask by Salzburg Enjoyer. Thank you for your question. He asks, what do you think are the big reasons so many votes went from ÖVP to FPÖ?
I think that has a lot to do with Kurz and not being there. I mean, if you look at the polls before Kurz joined ÖVP, lots of these votes were at FPÖ, and it's more that he managed to gain a lot of votes from FPÖ, and they're just going back, they're defaulting back to the party that they were anyway voting. I think this is lots of them, this one issue voters with migration that Kurz catched very well for ÖVP, and this is kind of they're going back. I think that's mainly that. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's like maybe the first time that FPÖ comes first, but it's maybe not even the highest result that they ever had. In the late 90s, 2000s, they were also at around 27%. So there's like, it's not that it's suddenly a growth that comes out of nowhere.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, I guess you could compare it to 2019. It's a plus 11%.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
But if you compare it to one election before, it's already not such a big difference anymore.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, then let's move on to probably everybody's favorite topic: coalitions and the future. We have on the website here on the screen. You can see multiple possible coalitions that the website already tried to list. Obviously I'm not the expert here, so I have no idea if these would even be feasible or realistic. But I saw a question earlier in the chat, someone asking, just before we go into your thoughts on this, Ich bin nichts asks, thank you for your question, is there a chance, a crazy coalition between Baber's SPÖ, Greens, Beer and KPÖ, if Beer and KPÖ pass the threshold? Is there a coalition possible?
I mean,
just for everyone.
If they make the seats, I have this was like it's a bit hard to think of it how it. I think it would still not be enough. It would probably need the Neos in that case, and I don't think that Neos and communists will go. I mean, liberals and communists in the government. That's even too wild for Austria. Not. Let's say it like that.
Yeah.
There is, I think, funnily, the Beer Party is rather a chance of being in the government or supporting a government that I can see than the communists, because I could imagine that they just would run with it. That's also one of the things is like with two parties being a bit at the threshold, it's very hard to know which coalitions would work. I mean, maybe to get the first thing out of the way, the coalition that we have now, ÖVP and Green Party, will not work anymore. They lost too many votes together. That will not be. The second big thing is like with FPÖ, all parties besides ÖVP said clearly they will not make a coalition with them. In SPÖ has even
once more. So everyone except ÖVP has excluded.
Exactly,
has excluded them. Okay, yeah.
Exactly, and also quite credible excluded them. Like I don't think that anyone would jump that. And ÖVP said they would make a coalition, but only without Herbert Kickl, which is the main candidate of FPÖ. So even that sounds quite hard. I mean, I think there is a chance if ÖVP gets first and FPÖ underperforms, but they still have enough votes for the government, I could imagine that this still works out, because I think like topic-wise, these two parties would love to go together much more than any other coalition.
So the main contention, just to recap, so basically everyone is not willing to work with FPÖ except for VP, but they have said that they don't want to work together with the main party leader of FPÖ.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, interesting. What about the other two listed then on the screen? We have
I think
SPO,
even
and
though
NEOS.
I would start down there with the one that is here listed as not working out, the ÖVP SPO, because it's very close if it's working out or not. I think it's also here, if you see it's 1 or 2 seats that are missing. If this works out, that's probably the most likely, I would say, followed by one of the top two. If it's not working out, they would probably either take the NEOS or the Green Party inside. It's very hard to guess which of them.
I can see. Could you do you know a little bit about the process? So, for example, if multiple coalitions like this would be theoretically possible, I mean, let's say in a crazy world, I mean, we're all guessing here anyway, so it's okay. But let's say FPO agrees to the terms of the ÖVP. They don't have their main man anymore. But at the same time, the ÖVP could also go together with the SPO. Which one would they then prefer? Would you reckon? Is it that the SPO or?
I think if FPÖ is willing to kick out the leader for being in government, ÖVP will take them. I mean, for two reasons. First of all, they are policy-wise closer to each other, and second of all, if you can get a party to kick out their leader, I mean, you can get probably everything from them.
Yeah.
And also, this has precedent. The ÖVP once managed to make a coalition with FPÖ while being with less vote share and getting the chancellor. So they already they know how to play the FPÖ sometimes. So that's probably one of the chances.
That is interesting. So okay, but I mean, the thing that comes to my mind instantly is that if ÖVP is signaling this, if they're saying, yeah, just get rid of your leader, I mean, that almost seems like a political play on its own, right? Just saying that, yeah, and then we'll work together. It's like we are officially not fully closed, but it's well, we're asking a lot to work with you, basically.
Yeah. I think this also. I think the thing is that Kickle is a very polarizing character, and I think they saw in the polls that if they would have lost a lot of electorate, like maybe some older voters going to SPO, rather some younger, more economical voters going to the NEOS, if they would have said they work with Kickle, because people were really. I mean, Kickle says he wants to transform Austria into a place like Hungary, for example. I mean, this is his. Orban is a good friend of his, so. Lots of people also in ÖVP don't want that. I personally don't think that the rest of the FPÖ has such a different opinion, but their name is not so prominent connected with that. So that's kind of I think that what they are showing.
The last question that I would like to ask you, and you probably try to answer as quickly as you can. The last question comes from chat. William Ibrahim 2 asks, considering beer is trying to be neither left nor right, how do they plan on joining coalitions?
If they join a coalition, I can see only one crazy coalition.
If
that would be SPÖ, NEOS, Green Party, and Beer. Like to make a center-left coalition working. I don't see them working with FPÖ. They definitely will not work with FPÖ, and I can hardly see them working with FPÖ.
Okay, very good. Okay, we have time for one more. Salzburger Joy once asks, if the current predictions more or less stay the same, what will be the political consequence of a ÖVP, SPÖ, and Grüne making a coalition, as this would be a coalition of losers? Would that be how would the Austrian public take such a coalition?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I mean, I think the problem is more like if all three parties really their electorate would be willing to do this. But I think on the other hand, it's forgotten that 5 years ago we had the big scandals, and they were even. I mean, we even started the last government with Kurz in the lead, and only after some time, all of the ministers and him stepped back, and everything's changed, and it's not a topic anymore. I don't think if they hold through 5 years, I don't think that in 5 years anybody remembers that they had a minus in the front of their numbers at the election.
Probably, yeah. I can see why you would say that. Before you go, do you have anything else that you wish to share with the audience? Any shout-outs that you're willing to do? Please, the floor is all yours.
Just if any Austrians are listening, go to vote on Sunday. That's the most important, no matter who you vote for.
Okay. Well, on that note, I would like to thank you a lot for joining us tonight, Mingo. It was a pleasure to have you, together with all of your expertise. So, without further ado, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye bye.
All right. It seems that I am lagging a little bit. Hopefully that resolves itself quite soon. All right. Everyone in the chat right now, our guest left, but we have another guest coming up very shortly. In about 5 minutes, I will be joined by Mr. Dietmar Pichler, also a very, very smart person when it comes especially to disinformation. He's Austrian himself, so we'll definitely dive into more topics surrounding how do these elections impact Europe, and how is disinformation linked with this subject, so to say. But we're going to take a short break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon, and yeah, see you in a bit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I have brought with me our second guest for tonight, Mr. Dietmar Pichler, an Austrian disinformation expert. And I'm very excited to talk about the elections a little bit more, especially a bit more towards what does it mean for Europe, and has disinformation played any part in these elections up until this point, and everything surrounding that, basically. So welcome, Dietmar. Nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very good. Could you introduce a bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you do? Where is your expertise? Could you talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I work as a disinformation analyst and a media literacy trainer. So basically what I do is with my new project, the Disinfo Resilience Network, I connect experts from various fields. That means European education, journalists, political scientists, also security experts, cybersecurity. So it's a wide variety. Historians are very important, for instance.
Okay.
And I bring them together to counter the common narratives against democracies, against Europe, and I have to say, maybe it triggers somebody, but also against the West, and the so-called Western collective West, like the Russians love to say. And beside that, the European focus is also there. As a vice president of the Austrian NGO Vienna Goes Europe, we provide information before EU elections, also before national elections, regarding what the EU means for us. A little bit identity building. I would not say I'm an activist, but sometimes it feels like activism if you have to repeat yourself so often.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Right. Well, let us dive into the first topic. We've already talked with the previous guest, but I would like to have your take on like what the polls are currently looking like. And obviously, the main one standing out is the FPÖ. And I guess I would like to hear what your thoughts are currently on why the polls look like they do.
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question. You don't start with an easy one, obviously.
No, that's right. I'm sorry.
So the economy is not fine at the moment. And there are issues in Europe since years. We have, of course, there's a lot of discussion about migration. There's a lot of discussion about security. And unfortunately, the far right, according to my opinion, unfortunately, the far right is able to exploit these challenges that we are facing. Okay. Then we have a very strong conflict with Russia, and the influence of, we will speak about it further, I guess, the influence of about this propaganda on our information space is very strong in Austria, and it also influences the result. But I don't think that we, to be honest, without propaganda, without foreign information manipulation, we would not have a dramatically complete different result. Okay. There would be a strong FPÖ. Maybe they would not be on the lead, which is a very difficult situation, of course, for the new government building.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I want to get to that topic in a few questions, because that is definitely very interesting. But for now, is there what is your take, or what is your thoughts on what currently is plays among the Austrian people? What topics do they find important? Because maybe then we can maybe look a bit about how the results are looking and why they look in such a way.
I think it depends whom you ask. For some people, foreign policy is not important at all. They don't think about it. For them, maybe social security is more important. Other people focus only on migration issues. We heard it, one topic, voters. And then there are people where it's a little bit mixed and they say, okay, this topic is more important than something else. So I prefer this party, even if it hurts in some way. For instance, there are a lot of people that I have met that they say they don't agree with the social policy and the economic policy of NEOS, the Liberal Party, but because of their clear pro-European stance and foreign policy, they will vote for NEOS, even if it hurts. And some people will vote for SPÖ because of the social policy, because of economic reforms they have planned. And they say, but they don't agree with this very, very strong neutrality-focused policy and with their quite weak stance on Russia, for instance, compared to NEOS. So there are a lot of voters who are not completely convinced for what they vote, but I would like also to speak a little bit about these small parties because they play a huge role in these elections.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Because they make it quite a difference. We see in this poll here that the Beer Party, for instance, would not be part of the parliament. There were a lot of polls where they actually, where it looks like they can be. There are also polls where the Communist Party, the KPÖ, can be part of the parliament for the first time since more than 50 years, as far as I remember. And that's quite interesting because the Beer Party is, I would say, it turned out to be, from the program we saw, a quite mainstream party, pro-European, moderate pro-Western party, so not typical Austrian, not typical very strong neutrality focused. But the KPÖ, I studied their foreign policy since more than 10 years, and they are not what many people think they are. Many people think they are about housing costs, about social security, about all these good things, about these good Samaritans, but their foreign policy is really, it's the Russian policy, for instance, comparable to the far-right FPÖ. Their radical neutrality policy is comparable to the FPÖ. And about other authoritarian regimes, I don't even want to start.
Yeah, it's fun. You see me smiling because our previous guest, he mentioned especially that the KPÖ is definitely known for that, of signaling to their constituents, we are the party that is building housing and we're the real social democrats. But according to you, there's definitely, if you're especially looking at their foreign policy, there is some, in your opinion, something to be worried about. Let's just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting because why are they not part of the parliament since decades? Because people said, I will not vote for KPÖ because they will not get elected to the parliament anyway. So I will vote for something else, for instance, for the Greens or for the Social Democrats or for some smaller parties we had meanwhile. But many people, they did not realize that the KPÖ has a kind of authoritarian connections. They have a very strong connections to Cuba, for instance. They have very strong connections to, they have a pro-Venezuela policy, and I'm talking about Maduro and Chavez before. So, yeah, and I know there are structures and there are festivals who is going to be presented there. So it's not like it's just a cute, small left-wing party, not at all.
Yeah, no. Interesting. A user in our live chat asked, Mr. Salzburg Enjoyer asks, in what topics is Russian propaganda affecting the Austrian election? But I want to get to that in a little bit after this topic. And also Nathan Gimine says, finally, a very interesting guest. So a little compliment to you. I wanted to ask, because you mentioned the very dogmatic neutrality stance of, well, in this case, the KPÖ, right, the very hard neutrality stance. Could you go a bit into how is this feeling or this idea currently among Austrians? Because outside, I always have the idea that Austrians try to be the most neutral and therefore are also maybe a bit more reluctant on sending aid to Ukraine or other topics that have include military spending in some way. How is that feeling right now? Is it still that this essence of neutrality in Austrian politics, or what could you say about that?
So basically, what regarding Russian influence, we have what everybody else, what every Western democracy has in the world, but we have something else. We have neutrality, which is a special ingredient in this dangerous cocktail, I would say, of Russian influence, because for decades we had a very close relationship with the Russian Federation, and we allowed a lot of influence into our information space by, for instance, these friendship societies and a lot of subversive activities. I'm sorry to sound a little bit like a Cold War or McCarthy era. I heard many things, but unfortunately it's true. We have there is a connection not only in old KPÖ organizations where they had these ties with the Russian embassy. For instance, in the 60s, the KPÖ publishing house published the little booklets for the Soviet embassy. Yeah, and we have these connections from the past. But now it's also about business. It's about the far right, and it's about the far right and even left wing or conservative politicians coming together and discussing with Russian stakeholders how behind closed doors. So this is what we had for many years. And this was also affecting our information space. We have such people at our universities. So all these together is a difference to other European countries regarding only the intensity. Yeah? In Germany, it's quite similar, even if they are part of NATO. I'm always surprised, oh my God, how you Germans manage to have almost the same or sometimes even worse, because usually Austria is something different.
Interesting. Okay. And so this instantly makes me think of a topic we covered with the previous guests, but the big Ibiza scandal is probably one of the times where you could definitely see this influence coming to the top, so to speak. For those that don't know, we just spoke about it, but it was in very short. I believe a party prominent of the FPÖ was caught with someone that was pretending, if I'm not mistaken, to be a Austrian or a Russian oligarch in Ibiza, and he offered up a very lucrative media or a news agency or something about that to the Russians in return for more influence and hopefully help with the elections. Did I summarize that correctly? You probably know a lot more about that scandal than I do. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, almost correct. It was the alleged niece of a Russian oligarch. Yeah.
Alleged, I see. Okay.
It was a kind of honeypot operation. It was a little bit reversed, of course, than what we see otherwise. But I think for me it was we always say shocking but not surprising, right. Because we saw a lot before, especially the people who monitor, because the problem is many people close their eyes, and we see that especially in the Ibiza scandal, it was about media influence. It was about our biggest newspaper, Kronenzeitung, and they said, yeah, we can write this and that. And you asked before which topics are influenced, and it's always about creating this anti-EU sentiment in Europe. So not being too like this Austrian patriotism means in their sense to be close to some authoritarian regimes. We have also a lot of China influence. We have I think at least 5 China friendship organizations, and they are not about the EU at all. It's about Austria, do your thing, but Austria is small. So it means there is something going on that is more about business, more about a little bit shady, and dangerous also for democracy, for the coverage of reality.
Yeah. So on the topic of disinformation, yeah, I would love to go into that a little bit deeper. You've already mentioned Russians influencing Austrian politics through these friendship programs. We spoke about it with our previous guest very slightly, but to my understanding, that are these like the cultural exchanges, or like what kind of organizations are these? Could you be a bit more specific in the way that these countries influence Austrian politics, and maybe European politics in a more broader sense? Through which means specifically?
So first of all, I would love to be more specific, but not mentioning names because they love to sue you.
Yeah.
Their slap cases are happening all the time, especially with these people.
Have you experienced this before?
No, because I'm very careful what I say, especially in public. But they love to do it, and they have good lawyers.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to be very careful if you speak about their structures and if you speak about individuals. But of course, there are many kinds of ways they influence. We have, for instance, people at the universities. We have far right and far left professors who basically transport the Kremlin's narratives. And these people educate students in a certain way, in an anti-EU way, especially since 2014, since the crisis in Ukraine began. They are also invited to TV and mainstream media. So I don't need to explain to you anything about social media, what is going on there with trolls, and we have all the leaks. So you have a completely toxic environment on social media, and then you have a mainstream media which is full of false balance, where you have experts who basically parrot the Kremlin's talking points in a maybe milder way or subtle way. So that's these agents of influence or useful idiots. We don't know who is paid, who is not paid. Is it ideology? But we know that we have a lot of them in Austria and in Germany. We also exchange these people. The Germans come to us and we go to Germany. Then we have a lot of NGOs, especially regarding the topic of neutrality. We have NGOs that I find very questionable because they speak about neutrality. They say they want to advocate to protect our Austrian neutrality because we are not neutral enough anymore. And then you go on their website, you check their materials which are published there, and you find all the Russian talking points about everything about Ukraine, NATO's fault, and what Russian language is banned in Ukraine, which is totally not true. Even also not after the war. I was there twice. So you have all these things, and this is not neutral. This is basically pro-Russian. So it's worse than neutral. I mean, even if there is an attacker and a victim, being neutral is somehow in favor of the attacker. But this is even worse. And then we have also these intellectuals publishing books. We have them in the schools. We have it in the school books. So it's not only social media. It's unfortunately not.
Yeah, because like you said, I think most of us, at least to some degree, are aware that this stuff is happening on social media, and that it's, I mean, at least to my layman understanding, is rather effective, especially, I mean, looking outside of the scope of Europe, in the UK, but also in the United States, for example, very, very effective. I guess when I'm hearing all of this, I'm wondering, what are our weapons, or like our what is our defense against such a thing? Is Austria, in this case, when we're talking about the elections, doing anything? And maybe we can take that question a bit broader to Europe-wide. What is being done to counteract these measures of, well, I would say foreign influence or foreign meddling in elections in this case?
I mean, regarding social media, we have a certain amount of awareness that something is happening. I mean, not that we are reacting already. I mean, there is no way to react. I mean, I remember, I don't mention names again, not because I would get sued, but to be fair. But there are people who say there was no attack from Russia at the EU elections in Austria. But my team, my colleagues, they recognize recognized that this doppelganger campaign, you know, where they have all these accounts and they're spreading fake websites, was attacking even a person I know personally. Yeah, so I know him, a friend. Yeah, and he saw these accounts, and you see how they work, and it's a particular pattern. And so, and then another person said to me, you know, they know that it's happening, but they don't want to talk about it because they are aware that they can't do anything against it. And I think a government, somehow it's right, because we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of the press. There is not a lot a government can do. But what I would suggest is, for instance, to establish a kind of task force, talk to civil society, talk to real experts. But unfortunately, we have the FPÖ, very powerful. They will not even allow good experts. They say, no, we need our experts, and you can imagine what happens. And it's getting even worse. And we have one case I would like to mention. There is one guy, a very famous guy on YouTube, and he invited all the famous pro-Russian, anti-Western, conspiracy-driven influencers from the academic sphere, so who are famous or who used to be famous, mostly old guys. And he has hundreds of thousands of views on his YouTube page. By the way, internationally, he's doing this in English. It's really a big thing. And he was part of the Science Commission in Austria. He was invited. So he was not only that they didn't see what is happening, they even invite such people. They give them a platform. So this is really very difficult. But after they saw what he does, they removed him from the platform. So there is at least some hope. But I'm wondering why there is no monitoring. So we like monitoring as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this comes down to the well, not age-old in this case, but the discussion that always comes up when we're talking about disinformation. If we want to combat it, then who is going to be the one responsible? And then people very often come to the conclusion, well, we can't have a government doing that, because then a government is telling us what is true and what is not, and that goes against, like you said, our free speech principles. But yes, something inside of me is like, well, that's true, but it's a bit sad or a bit difficult, because yes, we have free speech, and having a democracy is, I guess that's one of the weaknesses, is that people are allowed to say what they want, and that can directly work against us. So yeah, that's why I asked, and that's why sometimes maybe a bit I feel a bit defeatist over a topic like this, because you can feel the influence, maybe not always see it, especially if you're not very deep into it, but it feels like nothing much can be done.
What I tried is I tried to lobby all democratic parties, so not the far right, because the dialogue with the far right is it's not useful. There is nothing happen because they are radical. But I try to speak to the Social Democrats, to the Greens, to the Liberals, to the Conservatives, and try to push them to do something also within their parties, because even there is something going on everywhere. Every party has a wing of conspiracy theorists, smaller or bigger wings. This is also what people don't have in mind. It's not only the radical fringes. And what we also can do sounds stupid, but if you have monitoring, and if we agree as a society on an analysis what disinformation and propaganda influence is, what is happening, and what the narratives are. If we are aware of it, then already half of the way is gone, because this is resilience building. Because if I know that the Earth is not flat, nobody is able to tell me. But if you don't know that there are people around telling the Earth is flat, and if you are not sure that it's not flat, then there is a risk that something is going to happen.
There's a comment in the live chat by Eric Valli. He says, "This is great, but it reinforces my angst about this election." And I was wondering, coming off of that comment, is this topic of disinformation felt or talked about in the Austrian public, or is it, like you said, it's not being talked about by the government or the party, so the the people, just so to say, they don't really talk about it either. Is there a disconnect there? Maybe you can say a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic question. Yes, the public speaks about it, and the media reports about it more than before. So I was invited to public TV, public radio, and a lot of newspapers already. But what is my criticism about the discourse? It's super superficial. So a conversation like we have now, this goes much deeper, like what we discuss now, than when I'm in TV. I have 2 minutes, and it's just take care what you post. Media literacy. It's so mainstream, and I'm also in self-censorship because I cannot tell. Hey, come on, the media also should take care not to invite a professor who is every week on Russia Today. So if somebody is every week on Russia Today and goes to is in strange think tanks, and then you invite them for his opinion, what do you expect? This is what you cannot say. It's something that I do in background talks with journalists, and many care, but they don't say it in public. So the government has a kind of self-censorship, because it's the same. If you go for a beer or even only a coffee, people tell you, we have this problem. We have this former party member who we call the Russian bot, but they don't say it in public. And to be honest, if I meet people on the street, it's even a better discussion or more deeper discourse than sometimes if you speak to people who are responsible for that topic.
Yeah, but isn't that incredibly frustrating? I mean, in the sense, for any media appearance, I can imagine that they want to keep it short, right? And because they have all these other programs and stuff, but still, for a topic that I believe, and if I hear you speak, is very important, why isn't there much more of a push to do something about this? I always thought that maybe it has to do with what you said, media literacy and maybe education, but so sometimes it feels like that's not enough. But
it's not enough. It's like the problem is they see it only as an education topic, maybe, and not as a security topic.
Right.
And we have to go, and we love these stories about spies who steal information. We don't speak about people who bring toxic disinformation and who confuse us, our societies, all this subversion. These people say, no, but we have freedom of speech and everything. What we have, absolutely, no doubt. But some people, they have it. They are organized. They are paid, or they have an agenda. And we thought it's always, they said it's a CIA thing, but now we realize it's still Russia. It's still the old KGB structures and strategies. And there is one more thing which is also a little bit frustrating. It's the peace movement, what we saw during the 80s, which was also very biased, anti-Western. It's always, the USSR, they want only peace, but the West, they are pushing. And these people are still active. They have still their same worldview, this anti-Western worldview, and they are very well organized. And to speak about this, if I speak up about it, I know immediately somebody says, so you're not for peace, you are a warmonger, right. You are so bad. Today I heard that I love war. Not at all. But of course, I see who is attacking, who is defending, and all these things. And that unfortunately, in the current situation, we need some kind of European defense system, and we cannot disarm when we have such aggressive dictatorships.
Me personally, not the official stance by you made, but me personally, I fully agree with that. I mean, I think pretty much every human is for peace. No one wants to fight, but sometimes you are required to, especially when attacked. I think most people could see this in the context of a self-defense situation. Anyways, I would like to recenter a little bit more about Austria and the European Union, because obviously, Austria is not alone. It has got how many borders? We have Switzerland, Germany, Hungary, Italy, and Slovenia. Is that correct? 5 borders, I think. So could we maybe zoom a little bit out? What do these elections have for impact? Well, we already talked a bit about Austria, but on the wider European Union, is it like will nothing really change, or do we see like another Orban situation, so to say, like in the other end of the spectrum? What is your idea?
Yeah, I love such questions because you should have worst case scenarios in mind. And recently, I spoke about a lot of security experts, and I asked them what can happen in Hungary. Actually, how can it develop? And it can be much worse. It can be really a security risk, and I'm talking about an actual security risk for Austria, especially if we have a far-right government, if we have a government that is extremely close to Viktor Orban, who completely changed its country. It seems like this effect is reversible. Yeah, so there is no. I mean, in Poland we saw democracy coming back, and all the problems is getting better. I mean, maybe not perfect, and they also don't have this Kremlin connection like Orban has. And in Austria. So I agree with the gentleman in the comment section who said that he's afraid of the elections because, to be honest, it's a very dangerous idea to have a government that is even closer with Orban, because Austria traditionally maintains close relations to Hungary, which I don't like because Orban is Orban. But basically, there is a historical reason because we were one country and Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and for Hungary, they don't have these fond memories of this time. So it's important that Austrians have a kind of friendly stance because of historical reasons. But this is too much, this Orban appeasement. And on the European level, I mean, I can say something that is very controversial for my Austrian fellows, but I think when Austria joined the EU should say we only accept countries that are not neutral, because Austrian neutrality for the EU, it's always something that it means Austria can stop every initiative. It can stop a common foreign policy. Austria is a security threat. Yeah, for every country, because nothing is stable anymore. Unfortunately, everything is so dynamic and not in a good way. But what Hungary is doing, Austria can do the same in the future. And then there are two, and maybe the next country. We see also in the Czech Republic that there is maybe a shift. So, and we saw what happened in Slovakia. And I was 2 years ago, I was in Slovakia and I met some people from the government, from the disinformation unit. They already knew that they don't have much time. They knew they can only try to make it not so bad, but they knew exactly, they knew the polls and the shift. And it's all about this populism and Euroscepticism. And we have it also in Austria. We are not very pro-European. There are people who really would like to leave the EU, and there are people who just don't care. So this European movement, not very much.
No, okay. Maybe a bit confusing, but some people in the comments, they asked about the previous topic, so I want to cover those and then totally be done with it. Villa, who is a patron, asks, how are modern technologies like AI being used to amplify disinformation? Are there emerging trends in the use of deepfakes or AI-generated content? What is your opinion, and what is your opinion on the AI reports? And to combine it with a question, because I feel like they kind of aim at the same thing. D-Gaming JT says, I feel like we don't talk about enough specifics, like people want media literacy, but they don't have concrete plans. So I guess the first part would be, how is AI being used in disinformation? And the second part is there any concrete ideas that you want to share? And then I promise that we're done with the disinfo part, because there's many other things we have to talk about still.
Yeah, AI. I mean, I remember 10 years ago there were these bots. Yeah, so not trolls, not humans, bots. They were spreading the same slogans all the time. So you ask them, what's the time? And he answers, Putin is the best and the EU is in decay, or something like that, or something against Obama or whatever, or Trump is the best. It was also during the first Trump election. And now it's going, you basically, you can have a conversation with them and they're really very good. So I think very soon the human component will be much less. And about all this deepfake stuff, it's getting so much better. And recently we had one training where, of course, we have this finger problem, but they will fix it, and there is so. And unfortunately, people don't care. So there are 1,000 people who believe it, and 200 see it's fake, and they debunk it. But unfortunately, the fact check is unseen. So yeah.
Yep.
And about something concrete, what we can do, media literacy. In schools, we have teachers who refuse to educate their kids because they say, I don't have enough knowledge about that. And it depends so much on the teacher. And unfortunately, we speak about politics, so it's all about ideology, it's all about worldview. So it's so difficult to build resilience. You can say, okay, take care on TikTok. Yeah. But you can be a little bit more specific. You can say, take care about TikTok because China, the dictatorship, is heavily influencing and controlling TikTok. But then you're already political. You have already this. You're not neutral anymore. Yeah. So actually, if you're completely neutral in the Austrian way, you need to say every platform is the same. But then you can say something about Elon Musk. Yeah.
Yeah, but not every platform is the same. Obviously, they have different owners. They have different countries behind them, right? So it feels a bit, well, to me, it feels a bit silly to see social media as one giant thing, because clearly there's different.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right? There are different aspects. We see that Twitter, now X, is different with Elon Musk. There were problems before as well, but now it's complete. It's much more strong. It is right wing, very far right, and conspiracy theories, and a lot of things are not fact checked, not removed. Yep. And we see that a lot of these people who were financed were also active, but also on YouTube, and also. I had situation on Instagram where these random reels appear. It's a guilty pleasure. I love to watch reels. Unfortunately, because of my work, I see a lot of propaganda because the algorithm knows already what I want. Sometimes but I had situations where I saw 8 radical propaganda videos in a row before I saw something actual funny, because something actually casual content.
Right.
And it's very difficult to prepare kids for that, because you can only pre-bunk them not on how to use the platforms. You need to educate them in all the topics, because if it's the same stupid example. If you don't know that the Earth is flat, and somebody on a good platform who seems reliable, not flat by the way, tells you, then you have no resilience at all. Your guard is down, and it happens. So it's all about, I think, media literacy is something you can do only as a very, very basic vaccination. The next provocation, I say vaccination, also provokes some people, but it will not cure the problem.
No, understood. So, okay, thank you very much for those answers. Let's move back to Austria and its relation to the European Union and the countries in its neighborhood. Salzburg and Joria asked a little while ago, has Orban's ideas directly affected the FPO's ideology? You mentioned a relationship between Austria and Hungary to some degree. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with this statement, because for every populist and far-right leader, it is very important to show that they have international partners. So this idea that they work completely on their own and are their little islands, this is not true. They need cooperation, and unfortunately, from my position and my worldview, it works well. So these partnerships actually they strive in a way that Orban is kind of a symbol of somebody who achieved a long-standing leadership in his country, and that they can change. What they want is to change the structure of the European Union, or at least to block important decisions together.
So maybe you have an idea or an opinion on this, because in my eyes, it kind of looks like right now that far-right parties are maybe moving away a bit from totally dissolving the European Union, or at least having their countries leave them, but more reshaping them to their ideals. I mean, for example, in Le Pen in France, she has definitely become a lot more milder on a Frexit ever since Brexit, and I believe AfD still wants a Dexit. I'm not quite sure, but what is your opinion on that? The shift from right parties instead of breaking up the European Union, more changing it to their ideals.
Yeah, on one hand, I agree with this analysis. On the other hand, why should we believe them? I mean, they say whatever they need to say to get elected, and they know what their target audience demand from them. And people are somehow aware after Brexit, and they know the economic situation, that leaving the EU, especially for smaller countries, is maybe not the smartest move. I mean, to be honest, when I look at polls, I think a lot of far-right voters would prefer to leave the EU, but maybe not the majority, and maybe they know that they want to achieve more, that they want to have more potential voters, maybe to get more voters from the conservatives, more from the social democrats, and they can't do this if their position on the EU is too radical. So
Right.
I'm not sure if they will not change their mind, and destroying the EU and giving it a completely different, like you mentioned, I mean, destroying, changing, it's somehow maybe the same.
It could be. Yes, it could be. Well, okay. So someone in the comments, Eric Valley, says that the FPÖ in the government definitely means urbanization for Austria, if I'm honest. So it seems that some of the users are agreeing with your notion of maybe Austria becoming a even sort of secondary Hungary when it comes to European relations.
Yeah, the good thing about Austria is, I think, that the FPÖ was never able to do all the reshaping of our country, of our institutions, to give it a permanent, like Orban is. I mean, he's almost like Putin. Yeah. So there is, who was before Orban? What was, it's like he's forever. Yeah. Because all the institutions, the media, everything, the judiciary, the FPÖ tried this, they influenced it, and it's also very typical for Austrian policy that they try to influence the institutions a lot. But I don't know what the next government is going to do. We were lucky the last time that they were not able to change it and reshape it so much, but compared to Hungary, Austria is still a Western country, even if the people don't feel Western and if it's a forbidden word. But we have this, at least since World War II, a history of democracy. But if we take a look what happened before and what kind of governments we had the Hitler regime, and before we had a fascist Austrian regime, what many people don't know. So on the other hand, our history of democracy is not as old as many people think.
Yeah. Okay. So on that note, I would like to move to the final topic, and we don't have that much time anymore, as we've already taken up much of your time. But I want to cover this briefly because we talked a bit about it with our previous guests, but the current coalitions, the FPÖ can't rule alone. So maybe that will help in a sense that not all of the worst case scenarios that we've talked about tonight may come true, but you can see the screen that I'm sharing. Yes. With this website already posts some possible coalitions, and they list 4 here: the FPÖ and ÖVP, FPÖ and SPÖ. You can see it, right? So I would like to know what you think. And of course, this is looking to a glass ball, so it will never be accurate, but we don't expect it to. What do you think is probably most likely in this case, and what that may do for Austria's future in Europe?
Oh, wow. You started with the most difficult question and you end with a
Yes.
equally difficult question about these coalitions. I think ÖVP, SPÖ, and the Neos Liberal Party, that is possible. I heard that some people go into that direction. The SPÖ has I would say, quite left-wing leader, Andreas Babler now. And I think the issue is economics here, because ÖVP and NEOS have a different idea of economy. So that's going to be difficult. So they have to make compromises a lot. Then when we take a look at the next coalition, it's basically similar, even if the Greens are here, but it's still ÖVP and SPÖ who have a different view of economy. FPÖ, ÖVP, this is what I'm worried about, because I, to be honest, heard rumors that the ÖVP is thinking about a coalition with the FPÖ again, and they want to just negotiate that the FPÖ doesn't have these kind of institutions, and that they are not have the foreign ministry, not the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So it's not dangerous, but it's going to be dangerous. So even if they are not in charge of that, they don't even have qualified people. So it's very difficult. It was also difficult for the last time. So I hope it will not happen. Unfortunately, it's not so unlikely. Yeah, so this is quite possible. Okay. And then we have FPÖ, SPÖ. Nobody speaks about it, but unfortunately, they have something in common. This is this extreme strong neutrality position. And the SPÖ is split in their foreign policy. We have a pro-Western democracy wing, and we have a left-wing, old-school socialism wing. And this is a divided party, even if they speak about it only internally. And I have friends there who are really desperate about this situation. Mm-hmm. And ÖVP, SPÖ, we have the same issue as I discussed before. And ÖVP Greens, I think it will not work out. It will not have enough
votes. Yeah. Okay. So before I let you go, can I ask one last question? Because I think it's interesting. So a user in the chat, Terminatora12, asks, what is the likelihood of Austria lifting the Schengen veto on Romania and Bulgaria after the election? So I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the Austrians blocking land accession to Schengen for Romania and Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Do you see any change in that coming up with these elections, or no?
Yeah, I hope. I don't know if it's connected to the elections, but it's a shame. I mean, what the Austrian government is doing something, and it's completely domestic policy, but they do so much harm for European integrity, because I know, especially young EU members, they are not so long, and it changes the complete perception of the EU. It changes public opinion, not only about Austria, but I'm so sorry. I think we should give a lot more pressure against this, and everybody. And this is the perfect example for the toxic influence of Austria on EU affairs. Yeah, I mean, I'm not against my own country, but sorry, it's really a shame. So I hope that maybe a new government is going to change it, but I think it would be. It's quite unlikely that it's connected to the elections, but maybe they don't do it before elections. That is possible, so they do it afterwards, because everybody is speaking about protecting borders, but please, not with our European allies and European friends. It's really a shame.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dietmar, thank you so much for joining us. It was an incredibly interesting conversation, and I'm pretty sure we could talk about the topic of disinformation for hours on end. But I'm pretty sure that the chat is with me when I say it was very interesting, and thank you very much for being here. Do you want to say anything? Do you want to have any last remarks? Any shout-outs, perhaps? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's great to have a deeper discussion than usually in the media. So I enjoyed it a lot. And thanks for the very interesting comments and question in the chat as well.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was our last guest for the evening. I hope you guys enjoyed. What do you guys think? Before we send it off, I'd like to interact a little bit more with you before we send it off, because I thought it was very interesting. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about Austrian politics. I certainly know I did. Any thoughts? Any feedback? Maybe because maybe it was a bit too long. Maybe too little questions. I would love to hear your thoughts. If there's anyone left, maybe everyone just left already, and I'm just talking to myself right now. It could be the case. Well, I think most left. All right. Well, Eric says great guest. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah, I learned a bit, but don't feel like there's any idea how to improve it. I mean, I guess JT, that is a big issue with these things. I mean, there's only so much I think that we can do, especially on the disinformation topic. Yeah, that we might not be able to influence it as much as we would like, right? So that's a bit sad in a way. Salzburg says, "Great guest." Salzburg, thank you for the great questions. I saw many of them that were lovely to read. Very good. The guests were okay, but from one side of the political spectrum. Yeah, right. Well, I think our last guest definitely had his own opinion, but I feel like he came at it pretty neutrally. Is there any specific issue that you were not okay with, Brex? I saw you arguing a lot in chat, so I'm assuming you have an opinion on that. Thank you, Villa. Yeah, sorry, the chat delay is a bit too long, JT. Thank you for responding. I would like to follow up. Paul says, I would like to follow up to his point about how fact-checking is pointless if no one sees it. How do we get more to see it? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe we can have him on another time. Everything was great. When are the elections? Asks Kenshi. Yeah, on Sunday, people said already. Danger from us. The danger from such Austrian politics may cripple European defense. Maybe. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I had a pleasure, and thank you for your great questions. And yeah, thank you very much. Bye bye.